And a very, very good evening, each one of you. Thank you so much for joining us. And today is a very special day because this is the first international event that Power Up Business is holding. And we are very glad that Mr. Saket Gore is here with us. Saket Gore is the CEO Asia Pacific of the Himalaya Drug Company Pte Limited for Himalayas pharmaceutical, personal care, supplements, and animal care and feed division, a privately held MNC with presence in 90 countries. The CEO and the business head Russia, Israel, Central Asia, Eastern Europe region, the Himalaya Drug Company. We are very, very happy to have you here, Saket. Since you said don't call me sir, so I'm saying we are very happy to have you here. Very warm welcome. All of us are totally excited to have you. Before I hand over to you, I will also pose a question to you so that you could tell us something about yourself and about lots of things that our participants have already sent us as questions for you. We will do them as we go further. But the first thing that we would like to know from you is that what is the stepping stone to grow beyond a country's boundaries, which is taking our business international? I mean, how can we take our business international? What could be the stepping stone, like we say, the first stone of the first step?
Okay.
So over to you, Mr. Saket.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to interact with all of you. And I don't know from where Jaya got all this information about me. Let me just share a few details about me. I'm definitely nowhere close to what Jaya has mentioned in terms of my experience. But great. Let me share some examples from my professional experience also. That is what I'll try to do from my side. I don't claim to be an expert on international operations at all. Okay, that's a disclaimer from my side. I'm a Mumbai boy, born and brought up in Mumbai. I did my engineering from Father Conseco Rodriguez College of Engineering, which also people know as Father Daniel College. That's at Bandstand, Bandra, Mumbai. Work as a graduate engineering trainee with Mahindra for around a year. And then in 94 joined Jamnalal Bajaj to complete my MMS. And in 96 post my MMS is where I joined Lakme Lever Limited. Lakme Lever Limited was a joint venture between Lakme Limited and Hindustan Lever those days. And with almost for after a year or so, it completely merged with Hindustan Lever. So that's been my experience with levers, almost 10 years. Till 2005, I was with Hindustan Lever. That is what it was called those days. Today it is Unilever India. Done various stints in sales as well as marketing. I was a brand manager on Clinic Plus, Clinic All Clear, and Niar Hair Oil. And then in 2005 is when I joined Airtel. Airtel had joined in their Bangalore office, but it was a very, very brief stint for around 15 odd months. And in 2007 is when I joined Himalaya Drug Company. It was headquartered in the Bangalore that time. So I joined as a business head for consumer products division for India, as well as I used to look after the Russia and CIS countries. Joined as a business head, later on got promoted as a CEO. And then in 2012 is when I moved to Singapore to oversee Himalayas Asia Pacific operations. I think we have a comment saying cancel the spotlight video, so I'm not very sure. I'm looking at that. Okay, so that's very briefly on where that's my experience, what I have done so far. Unilever 10 odd years, Himalaya almost now 13 years. During my earlier stint with Himalaya, when I was based in India and I used to travel to Russia and CIS countries. CIS is countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Belarus, and so on and so forth. It was a sitting in India and also overlooking those operations. But obviously in 2012, when I moved to Singapore, it was extensively traveling into Asia. So I have traveled to almost all countries in Asia multiple times, stayed there, understood those consumers, understood the markets out there, and tried to build a Himalaya operation in this part of the world. So a lot of questions or answers, whatever questions you ask, my answers are going to be in context from my Asian experience.
Absolutely.
because Russia and others were also there, but that is what I'll try and do from my side.
We have actually come forward for that only, sir, to know your experience.
So your question was, what are the stepping stones to launch international business?
Yes.
I would actually take the question one step back as to ask as to why do companies like to step outside India or forget India. I'm presuming that most of the audience is from India, so I'm taking India as a reference country. But wherever you have introduced your business, why do organizations like to step out? Uh, the only answer, and perhaps the most simplest answer, is to grow business. Grow business, which obviously means grow revenue. Because in your home country or the base country where you are present, you would have a finite population, a finite consumer base. Nowhere am I saying that India's 1.3 billion is a smaller consumer base, but obviously when we are looking for growing revenue, when you're also trying to look for other avenues to grow business, is when consumers or companies start stepping out. They start exploring different markets. That's perhaps I would say is the first and the only reason why companies try and grow outside their base country. And for all our discussion, I will just take India as an example.
Sure. Although we have people from outside also, but yes, maximum are from India.
So that I would say, Jaya, would be the primary reason why consumer companies actually plan that they should be looking at uh, stepping outside India. There are other benefits which we have noticed that when you are stepping out of India.
I was just about to ask that what are the benefits? Yes. Thank you.
So what we do notice when you step outside India is, and I'll explain each of these points, is you learn. And I'm not actually calling it as a cliche, but I'll explain what it means in form of learning. It also helps to improve your base country business. I'll talk about that slightly later. It helps to grow revenue, earn foreign exchange. There is a reason why that would be important when we take the examples there. Third is it helps you to reduce cost. And I'll perhaps talk on each of this. Last is talent which is different in other countries. These, I would say, 4 or 5 benefits is what you get when you step outside India. Let me take the first example. Would you want me to ask or would you want me to continue, Jaya?
No, you could please continue, sir.
Okay. I'll take an example, which is the 6th point I'll come back, is it helps to actually diversify your business. And I'll start by that diversification example. When I talk about diversify, I'm referring to geographical diversification. Let's say recently what is happening in, let's say, India and the rest of the world is good 4 to 5 months. The entire country seems to be in lockdown mode. But when you look at countries which had operations beyond India, and let's take only Asia as an example, countries like Malaysia, countries like Vietnam, countries like Indonesia had perhaps only 4 to 6 weeks of lockdown. Those countries opened up faster and sooner. Along with that, the way those countries are designed for trade and business, the grocers, the supermarkets, as well as the pharmacy outlets continue to operate normally. Okay. When I say normally, if it was a 9 to 9 operations earlier, it continued to almost operate at 9 to 9. So organizations, when they had diversified their geographies, were able to perhaps manage an impact which they would have got only from India. So that was a benefit which I would say which diversification offers. It also has its challenges. And I'm not saying that by diversify you don't get into challenges, but this was one of the benefits which we see when you diversify. I spoke about the cost advantage. And let me take an example. India is a big market. Most of the packaging material, raw material is available in India. Right. But if we go to just a neighboring country in ASEAN country like Thailand, Thailand has a big manufacturing industry. And with our experience, I'm referring primarily from personal care side. It is almost 3 times larger in terms of the manufacturing base for India in the personal care space. So you have vendors who can produce products the type of decoration on your packaging material which is available in Thailand is far superior. The type of manufacturing process and flexibility which Thailand offers is much more varied than in India. And the biggest benefit which Thailand offers is the manufacturing cost is comparable to India. So it would have been a very, very good example to actually manufacture in Thailand during this pandemic and supply to other parts of the country if you were diversified. Something which would help you because the cost actually is at the same level. I'll take another example. If you are looking at a country like South Korea, which is a slightly more advanced country, the manufacturing base actually is 10 times bigger than India. But because of that manufacturing base, the flexibility which that country offers is very different. And the cost of South Korea is actually perhaps only 10 to 15% higher than India. So you could very well have a product which is manufactured in South Korea and the cost actually is not very high. So one is when you step outside India, one is you get to grow your revenue, as well as when you look at manufacturing bases like Thailand or you go to even South Korea, which is a more established country, you have this flexibility is what the benefit would offer. I spoke about cost advantage. A lot of things in India, when you manufacture, a lot of raw material or packaging material or the base packing material gets imported. So if you're actually manufactured outside itself at the core base, there is a certain cost advantage what you get there. I had spoken about foreign exchange. When you earn revenue in business or revenue in foreign exchange, how does it help? When I spoke about manufacturing outside in Thailand or manufacturing in South Korea, I'm just using those two examples. You would need foreign exchange. If you are operating only in India and trying to buy raw material or source raw material, packaging material from outside India, it is tougher. Indian banking system, Indian laws, unless you are an export-oriented organization, it is tougher to deal in foreign exchange. So these are some few benefits that you automatically get when you look at this diversifying or stepping outside India. We spoke about talent. India has vast talent. Definitely India has vast talent. There is no doubt about it. However, when you look at manufacturing processes, I spoke about South Korea and I would like to state that South Korea actually is manufacturing system is not a 100% automated system. South Korea uses automation in a very limited way. The last mile is actually done manually, which offers them huge flexibility. Now, this manufacturing process actually is very, very essential when you want to produce products like 10,000 units, 15,000, 25,000. This kind of turnarounds is what South Korea offers wonderfully. So these are few things which you actually learn. You have talent which you actually understand from those countries. This is what I would say are the reasons why you should step outside your home country. And in this context, I'm using step outside India.
Is it important to identify the countries first? Like you said, certain countries have this, stuff about money and the currency, and it's easier in certain places. Is it like that we need to identify countries also?
Okay, a good question. Yes, countries are important, and obviously, as a business person, you are stepping outside India to grow your business.
Right.
I use example like South Korea or Thailand. So these are countries which are already perhaps a couple of steps ahead of India in terms of variety of products available. However, we need to look at countries. Let's say I would like to give an example in 3 or 4 baskets. If we are stepping outside India, we have South Asian countries, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal. These countries where the penetration level actually is maybe 5 to 10% lower than India, even for primary personal care products. These countries are open to receiving products from India. When you look at a market, Bangladesh population is around 165 million, which is 16.5 crores. Pakistan is around 210 million, 21 crores, perhaps would be bigger than UP, Uttar Pradesh. Right. Sri Lanka is only 20 million, 2 crores, and Nepal is perhaps smaller. But these are countries where you could look at potential because your products have to sell. These countries are willing to look at products made in India. And each of these countries, a made in India product is a foreign product. So foreign product tag also you get here. These are countries which offer brighter prospects in the immediate term. Okay, that is one option because that is what you need to look at your market. Slightly move ahead when you look at the ASEAN countries. When I say ASEAN, you have countries like Singapore, Malaysia, and others. These are more developed markets. Singapore and Malaysia, I would say, Thailand are slightly more developed markets. If you were to look at markets like Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, each of these countries, Indonesia is the fourth largest populated country in the world with a population of 260 million, almost 26 crores. Philippines is 100 million plus, Vietnam is 100 million. These countries are at the same level of evolution as India for most product categories. It won't be easy, but these are likely to be bigger markets. So you look at the other basket, which is similar countries in Latin America. You look at Brazil, you look at Argentina, or you come towards African continent like Nigeria, South Africa. Similar to India, but the challenge is their skin tone is different, their food habits are different, their hair quality is different, their hair texture is different. If you're looking at these markets. So closer home, first I would say look at South Asia, slightly expand, look at ASEAN countries. Then look towards other markets which are comparable, who are willing to accept products is one aspect. Second thing is when you look at Middle East, a lot of Middle Eastern countries have a lot of Indian diaspora who have always used products in India looking at the similar products. Those markets are not small. Those markets would be willing to look at products. But this is how the global geography perhaps is split. I have purposely not said anything about Europe or US or China. These are large markets. When you look at North Asia like China or Japan, completely different animals in terms of, sorry, that was a wrong phrase, different countries to operate. This is what I would say as relatively stepping stones to set outside India. If people are wanting to look at those business, that is what I would say should be the first approach.
Wow. So that was such a great insight, sir. Thank you so much for that. Also, if you could tell us a little bit about the challenges that people could face, and then there are certain things that will happen and we should be mentally prepared for it, and what could be some strategies to help us overcome that?
Okay. First and foremost, I would say, I think one question which all of us should have is that what are the stepping stones you asked me? The only time when you should actually consider stepping outside your home country, which is India, is if you have a good product. Okay. When I say good product, even in India, if you have an inferior product, consumers don't buy you. So in case we believe that we have a good product, and I'm not stating that you have a unique product. If you have a unique product, definitely you should step out or go to whichever market you want. But unless you have a great product, do not try, because consumers are equally aware, consumers are educated. They will definitely not try an inferior product. So don't do that. Unless you have a great product, do not try. Second, before I come to the challenge, I would say, unless you have a profitable operation in India for at least 3 to 4 years, that you have been consistently earning profit for 3 to 4 years, the business is growing, and if you feel that over the next 2 to 3 years, your business will grow in India, it will generate profits, only then is when you should actually start looking at outside India. And I'll say why. The moment you step outside India, you are an alien. Nobody knows you. Nobody knows the product. So your initial time will go in terms of creating awareness for the product. Consumers should actually know you. Why should somebody buy a brand which they do not know? So you would need that amount of time. You should be willing to invest money and resource for that. And these are a few things that would be the challenges of stepping out. First level, that you have a sound base in India, which would be able to fund your future growth. When it comes to finances, I will talk about finance slightly later, that yes, today banks would be willing to fund. Banks would be willing to fund your operations, but obviously they will need to understand why should they fund you. I'm not talking in form of collateral. If your existing business is profitable, only when banks will lend you money. Okay, so you need to ensure that your existing operations in India, existing business in India is profitable. Only then try and step to the other market. Second is, each market is independent. Let me give an example. If you were to you are advertising in India, that advertisement doesn't get you any benefit in Sri Lanka. I'm just taking a neighboring country. Because that advertisement doesn't reach there, you have to invest independently in Sri Lanka. If you advertise in India, the advertisement will not reach in Bangladesh. So you have to look at each market as an independent investment. You have to plan your resources in terms of investment for each market. These are few things that you need to plan well in advance before you even take those steps. I'll take the third question, which a lot of people perhaps are not aware, is each country, we have a trade pact with ASEAN. That means if you export products from India to any of the ASEAN countries, you get a differential duty benefit. That means if you were to, let's say, regularly an import duty of 20% is charged on your products, if you export to an ASEAN country from India, you would get a reduced duty. It doesn't mean the duty is zero. You will get a reduced duty. It doesn't mean the duty is zero. Before you export, your products needs to be registered. That means I'm taking an example in Malaysia. If you want to export products from India to Malaysia, you have to register your products in Malaysia. Malaysia has a department where you have to submit all your documents in terms of what are the ingredients which go into the product. The products have to be certified for safety, certified for quality, and it is not a self-declaration. There are recognized international laboratories where the certifications have to be acquired. Each of the certificate might cost at least 10,000 rupees plus. So all these have to be submitted. Each product, we have to pay almost anywhere between $100 to $500 for application for each product. It takes around 6 to 8 months for a product to get approved. If it is a personal care product, if it is a pharmaceutical product, it might take anywhere between 2 to 3 years. Only then you would be granted a certificate which is perhaps valid for 3 years, or some places it is 5 years. Is when you can actually export the products there. I'm talking about only exporting. We are not even spoken about how would you market the products there. So these are a few challenges which always keep coming. And all these countries, initially when you would try and register, everybody accepts only foreign currency or their local currency. So all these challenges would obviously be there when you are even trying to look at registering the products or trying to build your business. That's what comes to my mind immediately, Jaya, when you're trying to step out.
I think we have to be very mindful of the kind of finances that we have in store, because there could be a lot of investment required in terms of course, money and in terms of time. And I'm very happy to share with everybody that this episode is sponsored by Anand Rathi, who is one of the wealth management companies. And, they kind of really help people out to understand how they can build up their financial portfolios. So we have Meenal Shah, who's the head client engagement here. But having said that, sir, we really want to understand, one being this part that, okay, we need to have finances in place. We need to have the time and the bandwidth to grow abroad. But there would be some things that we must do and we mustn't do. So if you could just throw a little bit of light on the do's and don'ts, while we are thinking of turning, it'll be really helpful for us.
Sure. I missed out one additional point when we were talking in the earlier challenges, the language. Okay. What we obviously face is all of us, let's say in India, the business language is English. But even barring, let's say, a country like Singapore, where the business language is English, every country there speaks their own language. So you will have to submit documents perhaps in English, or if required, you will have to get it translated. It's a cost. It's also consuming time. So these are things which you need to prepare for this. Fair enough. From there, let's say there are broadly 3 or 4 such ways of expanding, if at all you are looking at. One, and perhaps what a lot of people might be doing right now, is trading. When I say trading, is you might be based in India and you would have buyers who might be coming from foreign countries to buy your products. So you might very well export the products. So you have export houses who buy products from India and export to those countries. There would be multiple export houses whom you can actually tap into, and there are export houses who cater to certain region. So one is to approach those export houses, and that is the first way to do this. Not easy, but that is the first way to do that. Second example would be you have organizations like, and I'll take an example here, is an organization like DKSH. DKSH is a well-known company who has presence in Asia. They actually specialize in market expansion. What that means is they would identify brands. Let's say you go as a principal, you offer your product to them, talk to them. If they get interested, they will buy the products from you, and they will get into an agreement with you. They could only do the logistics. They could do your logistics and distribution. They could also do logistics, distribution, as well as market the products for you. Okay. So that is the second way of approaching. And this I just took DKSH, which is a multinational listed company. There are smaller companies. There are first generation, second generation businessmen who have, let's say, stepped outside from India. And here I would just like to take an example. I met a business family who moved from India almost 40 years back. And they are operating in the Philippines. The second generation grew up in the Philippines, and they are the largest importers of eyewear in Philippines. So you'll have those business families who started something else, and now actually there is a second generation who's willing to take, I would not say risk, but willing to try out different stuff. So there are those business houses in each country who would be wanting to expand. Right. Third way to do it is you have retailers like Sephora, Watsons, Guardians. Now Sephora is a slightly premium end chain. Now they are always willing and wanting to import products, offering newer products to consumers, because that is how the chain is based. You would have retail chains like Watsons. I think in India it is a similar format of Health and Glow, which is health and beauty format. Yes. So these are pharmacy chains who obviously also want to introduce new products to their consumers. They are more at a mass level. Watsons and Guardian are similar. So now, where do you meet them? The next question would be, where do you meet them? Obviously, they may not be available online. Like we have Pragati Maidan in Delhi, where there are large exhibitions, large industrial exhibitions which happen in India. Similarly, you have exhibitions like Cosmoprof. Cosmoprof is a chain or other exhibitions which will Cosmoprof exhibition will happen in Asia. It would happen in let's say Europe. It would happen once a year. So the Asia's Cosmoprof happens in Hong Kong. Okay. For Europe, it would happen perhaps in Italy. It would happen in USA. I'm not aware or familiar of USA, but it would be worthwhile to actually invest in making a trip to those markets during these exhibitions. Go there as a visitor. If you find that you can market your products, next time invest in putting up a stall there. There are retailers like Watson, Guardian, Sephora's. There would be other business houses who definitely make a trip there. They are interested to launch their products. So you'll find both type of people. People who are buyers, people who are trying to sell your brand. Mm-hmm. These are ways to actually expand the network, meet potential buyers outside India. This is what I would say should be a few approaches to contemplate going outside.
Anything that you feel that should not be done, these are the things that should be avoided, the don'ts.
Okay. 2-3 things. As I said, unless you are confident of your India operations, you believe that you are profitable, do not step out. Okay, do not step out. Second thing is, Cost outside India, I'm saying India is also today an expensive country to invest in marketing, invest in setting up an operation. Cost outside India, and I'm not looking at developed markets like Singapore or to that extent Malaysia or forget Japan. I'm talking about comparable markets like Philippines, when I spoke about Vietnam. Cost is almost 20-25% higher than India for every activity. Okay, in terms of hiring manpower, in terms of travel, hotel stay, everything is at least 20-25% expensive than India. So you need to budget that. So ensure you have sufficient money. Second is take one market. Okay, take one market because each of these markets are larger. Draw your business plan, and a rough thumb rule would be that it would be minimum 3 years up to 5 years before you at your operation break even. We haven't found any business person who would make money in less than 3 to 5 years. I'm talking operational break even. I'm not talking about clearing all your investments in the first 3-5 years. Okay, so go mentally prepared with that. I'm just sharing a practical example. There was a good advertising agency based out of India who had grown in India, and they wanted to establish ad agency in Singapore. And they said we would, let's say, look at beyond Singapore, Malaysia, and other places. So we had done the rough, or at least that it was a known couple. So when they actually went through the costing, they realized that operating in Singapore and Malaysia, they would need at least $1 million every year in form of investment. So you're talking about $1 million investment in every year, and we're saying at least for 3 years, that is the working capital you will need. You need to be mentally ready to ensure that you invest those 3 million. Otherwise, it is not possible to sustain. Unless you have that, whatever is your financial backing, do not make that step, is one. Second is, in India, you have an established business, the credit terms. A retailer pays you in 15 days. Okay, a retailer will pay in 15 days. A distributor would perhaps pay cash. When you are exporting outside India, the international terms usually are 90 days to 120 days. You will not recover your money before 90 days. Retailers expect credit upwards of 60 days to 90 days. And if you are a new brand, obviously they will negotiate better from you. So we need to be clear that you will not recover your money. Second question, what you had asked me is what should we not do? Invest time on finding a partner if that is what you should do. Do not try and do everything on your own. Okay, invest a partner. When I say partner, who will work in that country for you. If it's a large business organization, it is different, but you will need somebody to do that for you. Reason, two ways. It is not a part-time job. Building business, let's say, in another country is not a part-time job that along with India, you will do that. You will need somebody there. Invest time. Okay, invest time. Don't be in a rush. Lastly, don't sell your product on consignment basis. When I say consignment basis, is a lot of people would say, okay, you send me the products. If the product sells, is when I will pay you money. A lot of retailers, especially with newer brands, insist on that. Do not do that. Because the moment you give that flexibility, be rest assured that you can never change your terms of trade. It might be slow. It is okay that you do not get a great partner. Don't rush. Invest that time. You state your investment terms of trade would be whatever you agree on 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. Insist on letter of credit. It's called LC. Do not send money or goods on consignment. International business, recovering your money is tough. So ensure you get letter of credit from a international bank. Without that, don't try and sell business. With retailers, do not agree on consignment trade. Because there are some brands whom we always hear that if you, let's say, put up stocks in a retail base, there would be a lot of theft, and the retailer actually say it was consignment basis. We do not know who took your products, so we will not pay you for that. This kind of stuff sounds small, but this will start adding cost to you. Lastly, if you're borrowing money from India or investing money from India internationally, India rupee, INR versus USD continues to depreciate. Okay, I'm not an economist, so I cannot predict what it will happen in future. But the last 3 years, it says that every year INR has been depreciating at the rate of around 5 to 7%. So budget those things, budget that for you. If business sets up great outside India, great, you will do business in USD. If you bring money in India, is different case. But if you're investing from INR to dollars, ensure you build in the cost. These are a few things which came to my mind, which we should be looking at before stepping out.
This is indeed extremely enlightening, Saket. And I must say that the biggest takeaway that I personally have today is that it's extremely correct when you say that, you know, we become at times confused and desperate, and we don't negotiate terms in the beginning. We just give in that, okay, this is also okay, that is also okay. But later on, we have to pay a real huge price for that. And that's a very big lesson you've given us today. So thank you so much for that. And yes, that should be kept in mind.
Okay, along with this, obviously, there were, let's say, a lot of challenges that we spoke. Now, the question would be on the mind, okay, fine, yeah, so what should we do?
Yeah.
I'll come towards that. See, it is obviously when a retailer wants your brand, they need, okay, they need. In all the countries, at least in Asia, our experience is products which are made outside that country is a foreign product. Let's say all of us, the moment you have product outside India, we say foreign product hai, and automatically you associate good quality with that. Right. So retailers, consumers are seeking products from outside their countries. So the potential exists. Okay, the potential exists. Now, how do we identify those potentials? What should we do? I gave an example about participating or visiting fairs like Cosmoprof Fair. If you are into, and for each business, there is a fair. I'm talking about a professional fair. So if you're into animal products, it will be WIV. All these fairs keep happening. It would be worthwhile to visit any of those fairs. There would be perhaps a Cosmoprof even in India. I'm not familiar as of now. Do visit there. You will at least see what kind of buyers or what kind of brands are being sold. Right. Quality of products in India are at par. Let me say, in terms of functionality wise, in terms of efficacy, products made in India are good. A challenge is packaging. Outside India, and I'm taking an example, if you're buying a medicine and you're buying a medicine strip, and if the strip edges are, let's say, slightly wrinkled or torn, I'm not saying the product there is any effect on the strip, but if the edges are torn, wrinkled, in India, we would not consider that as a damaged product. Outside India, that is a defect. Okay, if you were to buy an individual blister card of a lip balm, and let's say the edge of the blister card is torn, or forget torn, even if it has a mark on that, the consumer doesn't buy the product. Things what you could do for that is, let's say in India, most of the goods which get shipped are packed in a carton box. It is called a shipper. Typically, those shippers are 3-ply. That means there are 3 layers. Internationally, there are 5 layers. That is a minimum. So when you have a carton box made of 5 layers, it automatically provides a lot more safety, stability, and goods the way they are transported in 5-ply shippers reach safer without having a problem. Because the packaging is considered to be an integral part of the product. Okay, so consumer will reject, a retailer will reject. Right. Next comes simple things like shelf life. In India, most products have a 36-month shelf life. In countries like Thailand, the moment you have less than 50% of shelf life left, so that means the product is good even for 1.5 years, that is 18 months shelf life is left, you cannot import the product in Thailand. Retailers start giving back the products on the shelf. because you have only 50% of the shelf life left. So when you plan your supply chain, you have to ensure that the freshness of stock is planned correctly, because otherwise retailers would return the goods. One is the customs won't even allow you to import your products. So these are a few challenges which you need to keep in mind when you are approaching this. Lastly, let me take an example. Let's say Singapore has a body called EDB, Economic Development Board. They have an office in India also. These offices are actually meant where they are looking for potential investors, potential startups, potential brands who would be willing to set up operations in Singapore. And this EDPs, or if you were to meet anybody in EDP, I think they have an office in New Delhi as well as Mumbai. Set up an appointment, go and meet them. The reason is, if I want to buy something in India, I'm looking for a particular item from India, I would actually go through EDP. From Singapore, I will approach through EDP if I do not know information. Let me take another example. Embassies. Embassies have a economic wing, economic team, which is actually sitting in each embassy. So let's take an example, Australia. I just took an example, Australia as a random country. If Australia is looking for selling some of its products in India and they do not know whom to sell, they will approach the economic team based in India, Australian embassy in India. If you are trying to export products to Australia, one approach could be to actually go and meet the economic related team in or business related team in Australian embassy in India. They would try and meet you certain potential partners. So it is an important way to actually meet the right people there, and they will help you set up operations. Their job is only to facilitate. Australia would be equally interested to meet potential buyers of India as well as exporters of India. So it works the both ways. So these are a few ways in which at least you could approach different countries to start your international operations.
Right. Wow. So, I mean, in fact, I was going to ask you that what would you like to tell the startups who are wanting to start abroad? But I think you've given us so much information. And I think anybody who's looking at expansion or growing beyond boundaries, they can at least get started with this, keeping these things in mind, being prepared for, the things that are coming up. And of course, like you said, collaboration and having a partner outside is also extremely important. So with that, with your permission, if I could take the questions that we have from the participants. So while we were doing the registrations, we have taken a few questions, and we will take them first, and then we will take a few from the participants who are here also. As time crush, we will not take too much of your time, but yeah, a few of them we will take.
Please go ahead, no issues.
Thank you so much. So we have a question from Rajan, and he says your views about collaboration. I think you already said a lot about it, but if you want to add a bit to it.
See, I would say that, and I'll take a slightly different example. See, when you have larger business houses, so you're looking at Unilever. Unilever obviously is a multinational which has established operations. So they have deeper pockets, and they would at least go ahead and set up an office in each of those countries. When we are looking at startups, okay, we obviously would need some collaboration in these countries. So when I spoke about collaboration, when I would say either approach somebody like a DKSH, which is a business house which helps to expand business, or look at a retailer, because that is where you will at least go and sell your product. All these examples I'm stating from a product perspective. I haven't commented at all on the service perspective, because I do not have experience in service. So you would either go through a business house or distribution house or business house like DKSH, go through a second generation family who's wanting to expand. Third, obviously, I said is from a fire retailer route. But a collaboration or collaborator or a partner, I would say, would be essential if you are trying to expand outside India in the initial time frame.
Great. I hope that answers you, Rajan, and thank you for that question. We have Vikram Shah, and he's asking how important is networking?
Okay. Okay, I'm taking this question from a business context. Obviously, when you say how important is networking, I think it is linked to the first question. Uh, from a setting up a business outside India, uh, unless you network, unless you meet people who are interested, uh, or let's say you have $5 million available to grow and you are willing to step outside India, that you could do independently. But otherwise, without networking, that means meeting potential buyers, which could be in form of retailers or distribution houses or business houses. It is tough to set up business on your own. So networking obviously would be required. And here I'm talking about the business itself. None of the questions that we have taken today are from consumer side, because you're talking about setting up operations. So I haven't spoken about marketing at all. So networking obviously is required.
Right. So I also completely believe in the concept of networking, and that in itself has brought us here today together. So thank you for that answer, sir. And Vikram Shah, thank you for the question. I hope that answers your query. We have Parini Shah. She says, I want to do something internationally. Is this the right time?
There is never a right time. Okay. When I say there is never a right time, means I'm not referring to the right now COVID situation or pandemic. I'm not commenting on that. See, as economies keep evolving, for example, I just spoke about South Asian countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Pakistan. Uh, each economy keeps growing. Okay, see whether you grow by 5%, 7%, 10%, and obviously this growth keeps happening because of economic activity. If you start at the early stage of growth, you have a better chance of growing. You have a better chance of growing with lesser investment. The later you start, the cost, challenges, and competition keeps increasing. So I would say that you need to decide if you have a great product, as we said, or a unique product. Do start. If you have your finances ready, there would never be a good time, because the more years go, the more months go, years go, the competition and challenges will keep expanding and growing.
I think yes, that's a lesson for all of us, that there is no right time. Now is the right time. So maybe get started. Thank you for that insight, Parini. Hope that helps you. We have a question from Mayank Agarwal. He says, what should be the trigger to expand beyond existing markets?
Oh, that's a very different question. I think a few of things what we spoke about when you said what are the, could you repeat the question again? I will
Yes.
take it word by word.
Sure. It says, what should be the trigger to expand beyond existing markets?
Obviously, the trigger is if you are finding that you are growing handsomely in your existing market, or you are generating sufficient amount of money. We spoke about profit, and I suppose I missed out one word or one key business insight is cash flow. Okay, if you are generating profit and you are generating surplus cash flow for at least 2 to 3 years consistently, that would be the right time to expand beyond existing market, because you have something surplus which you can invest in a different product category or diversify into the market, is what I would say should be considered.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I hope that answers you, Mayank. Thank you for the question, though. So now we have a few online, right on the spot comments and questions. I'll just read them out to you. Payal Anani says, insightful session. Thank you for your valuable time. God bless you. Thank you, Payal. We have Rena Tandon. She says, very useful tips and awesome insights. Thank you, Mr. Saket, for the information and wonderful tips. Thank you, Jaya.
Most welcome.
We also have a few questions coming in here.
Jaya,
Okay,
can I ask one question to Saket?
Yes, Sanjay, of course.
Thank you very much. Saket, first of all, this is Sanjay here.
Yeah,
Sanjay Dili here. Yeah. So thank you very much for, first of all, honoring our invitation and coming on with power of brand. And I know, and work means at least giving such a wonderful information. Actually, I have a very interesting and a different question. See, what we have seen is Indian population is almost like, 65 countries or 66 countries population. You have seen Singapore, which is just like 59 lakhs. You have seen Asia. So when you moved there, there are established brands, and then you need to look at your segmentation of a strategy, marketing strategy, and then you have to earn the market share for a local brand like India. How exactly you have done it? What is the success story behind it? What pain have you taken? I have multiple questions.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll take this example or a question in 2 or 3 parts.
Yeah.
One is, see, we have brand Himalaya obviously offered a great leverage for us to take it outside India, because as an organization, we are a 90-year-old organization. A lot of people, let's say, you have certain brands in the world which travel. Okay, and let me repeat the phrase again. There are certain brands which travel. What it means is that people, when they travel, there are certain unique brands which they like to buy and shop. And we were lucky enough that brand Himalaya travels a lot. That means there are a lot of Indian, as you said, there are Indian people, Indian origin people who are present in almost 65, 70 countries. So they take the brand along with them. They expose the brand to the local countrymen. So that was an advantage that we had, that obviously a 90-year-old history, which helped us do that. But let's come to the main specific question that you had, is what was the reason why we have succeeded? One is there is some uniqueness that you need to offer. And let me take one simple example is we have a flagship ingredient which is from India. That ingredient's name is neem. Okay, let's say neem is an ingredient which is native to India or Indian subcontinent, but it's a wonder herb. Now, rather than talking about anything else, wherever we have gone, we have spoken about Ayurveda as a science and neem as an ingredient. So trying to replicate brands on glamour, trying to replicate brands by taking brand ambassadors, we have stayed wherever we have grown and succeeded, is we have stayed true to our roots, which was Ayurveda, and talk about certain herbs, multiple herbs, but I just took neem as an example. And that is what we have continued to grow, continue to market, and hence that has helped us grow. That, Sanjay, I would say, has been one of our key approaches to market. Last part, which was from the business side, is wherever we have gone, a few insights which I shared earlier. Wonderful, Jaya. That's Neem Face Wash. That's the market leading brand.
I just got this. I thought I'll show you.
Now that you are sure, let me say that this is a product category that we are market leaders in India. We are market leaders in Middle East. We are market leaders in countries like Bangladesh, market leaders in countries like Indonesia with these product categories. Okay, a good product. I think one of the aspects what you spoke about, a good product stands out. A good product stands out in any market. So obviously this is the reason why we have succeeded. The business aspect, Sanjay, your question was why did we succeed is nowhere have we gone with keeping a 2 or 3 year horizon. Okay, wherever we have gone in, we have always gone in with a 6, 7, 8 year horizon, that we would, if we are lucky, we will succeed earlier. But we have gone there. Each country that we have entered, we have never exited so far. Okay, today we are present in almost 100 plus countries. Every country that we have entered, we have gone with a business plan, investment plan, a strategy. When I say strategy, let me take an example, because these are pretty big words of strategy. For example, in Asia, it's a young population. It is a hot, humid weather market. So it's a cleansing market. When you go towards Europe demographics are, it's an aging population. It has cold weather. So a cleansing product is not going to be a lead category there. So the market there, what has succeeded for us has been moisturizing, as well as let's say oral hygiene, oral care, toothpaste. So look at the market, plan your entry strategy. That is what has been done. And obviously, we were lucky enough that as an organization, we have decided that we do not want to grow fast. If we have grown faster, we are happy. But look at a longer term horizon. Go with your staying path. These are a few reasons why, Sanjay, we have succeeded. Does that answer your long question?
No, in fact, Saket, thank you. One more, I am just tempted. In fact, see, you have seen India, you have seen international market, you're there with Himalayan for 13 years now. What
Yeah.
is that you haven't done till date which you want to do next?
Wow. uh, what I would say as an individual, we've seen different market, different geographies. I have never actively worked in Europe or US market. Okay, we have a different team there and different office which works there. What I would like to make it is we are present in 100 plus countries. Uh, at least in one or two product categories, we would like to have absolute market leadership. We spoke about categories like cleansing, we are market leaders. We would like to become market leaders in at least one or two categories in most of the countries. That is something which keeps me going professionally. Second is, as a proud Indian, uh, we enjoy or we like to buy products from outside India. And let me say, made in USA, made in EU, made in South Korea, made in Australia are considered to be great products. Our own heritage, which is Ayurveda, yoga, which is India origin, actually is now promoted in USA. We would like to see Ayurveda as an alternate stream of therapy in the West, in countries outside India, because that is where Himalaya has grown. I would be personally very, very satisfied if most people in these countries that we operate start practicing Ayurveda. Look at Ayurveda as an alternate form of medication, alternate form of living. That is something, Sanjay, would give me immense pleasure, would make me very happy.
I am so sorry because I am tempted because so knowing you as a person, because when you joined Himalaya, there was a time, it was a challenging time. And then you went to Asia market again, you went alone, you built something very big. In fact, I wanted to ask you very, very interesting question again is anywhere where your strategy is not, as a connoisseur, I know you go into the detail, identify something. Anywhere your strategy has gone for the toss, somewhere you find a failure, you need to change immediately, change the gears. Can you give me one case study where, you have seen there is a difficulty and yes, I have changed this and, then I have seen some success?
I'll take an example. Let's say when you succeed in a certain market, the moment you go out, you obviously expect that you are going to have a right to rule. When I say right to rule means if you are market leaders in the category, expectation is the moment I launch my product, consumers are going to buy, like the product in the same way that you got your love and respect for your brand. This two examples I'll take. One was misjudging the market on product category. Second was, okay, let me take the first example. I spoke about Russia or European side. When we went to Russia, our portfolio had a lot of cleansing products. Okay, and Russia has a good 6 to 8 months of cold weather. Okay, cold weather. Let me give you a good example because I was trying to think for an example is as a part of our assignment, we also look at Mongolia. And Mongolia has almost weather which drops to minus 30 degrees. And minus 30 degrees is a standard weather during winter, even in cities like Ulaanbaatar, which is their capital. So we would actually export products to countries like Mongolia, which were, let's say, cough syrups and others, which would freeze. So we kept actually supplying products during because let's say the winter season sets in October over there. So we would export our products from August and September, and by the time it would actually reach there, the products would all freeze. And we almost had 2 seasons where we had faced those challenges. So what we immediately did is that actually started manufacturing and supplying all the winter products before the winter season would set up there, because all their warehouses are temperature controlled. So it was easier for us to actually send the goods when the temperatures were reasonable, around 18 degrees, 20 degrees positive. The products would reach in our warehouses and they would be stocked, which would be temperature controlled. So that was one thought which came to my mind. Second, I spoke to you about was Russia, where our product portfolio had to be slightly looked at differently. Rather than focusing on cleansing products, we had to look at moisturizing. So all the investment in terms of the thought process, planning that we did, we looked at from India perspective that, okay, India, our lead category is cleansing, so we should invest on cleansing. Whereas when we approach Russia, we realized that Russia doesn't need cleansing. And for a lot of women, I will give an example there. In India, because of the weather, we frequently wash our face even outside our homes. Okay, we wash our face frequently outside our home, and that is one of the ways to look at the market. In Russia, women apply makeup when they step outside home. They do not wash their face till they go back home. Because if you wash your face, obviously your makeup is washed off, and they do not like that. One is there is no need, because the weather, in that cooler weather, you don't sweat, you don't need to wash your face. Second is, women would not wash their face because the makeup would go away. So the whole thought process, planning of looking at cleansing had to be altered. Look at moisturizing as a thought process. So this was where you look at India and plan outside. It was wrong. You had to change it.
I hope that answers you, Sanjay. Can we move forward with other questions?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you so much for connecting me with Saket and this program, and the kind of insights we have got today are amazing. And I don't know how much and how I will be able to thank Mr. Saket Gore, but we still have a few questions left. If I have permission, I'll just take them.
Please go ahead. Absolutely, please go ahead. I'll be very happy to share experience, whatever I can share from my side. So please go ahead.
Thank you so much. We have Rahul here. He's asking, yes, please let us know the future organic and vegan, and they are priced too high. Can we bring the cost down? Okay, I think he's trying to say that the future is going to be organic and vegan, and it is priced too high. Yes, we know that. Can we bring the cost down?
See, cost is a manufacturing. Now you're asking a slightly more generic point.
Yeah, true.
Now, let me drive a second example here to answer that question. See, you're looking at power generation through sun energy, right? You're looking at setting up the solar panels to generate electricity. Now, if you look at the cost of a solar panel 5 years back versus the cost of a solar panel today, I feel it is come down by almost 50%. Because there are more solar panels being manufactured. The technology is improved to manufacture a solar panel at a much cheaper cost. So the cost of generating electricity through solar panels has come down to almost 30% in the last 5 years. If it continues at the same rate, I'm sure solar energy will become far more cheaper over the next 5 to 7 years if the cost of manufacturing those panels go down. Same thing when you're looking at organic products or you're looking at vegan. It is a trend which is, let's say, started from Europe, from USA. In USA, 40% of the market, 40% of products available in most product categories are organics. And there the costing of organic product vis-a-vis regular, the difference is only 20 to 30%. Because almost 40% of the categories are organic, the cost of production, manufacturing has come down considerably. Same would happen perhaps in vegan. If you're looking at India, I would say the penetration level of organic, or forget India, even in Asia, organic and vegan are trends which are still just setting up. starting. So the cost is still very high because you are importing most of the products. Manufacturing products in an organic factory is expensive. To get it certified, the certification agencies' costs are very high. As volumes pick up, the cost would keep coming down. So that is where I feel these two categories, which are organic and vegan, will settle. A premium of 20 to 25 over regular products is what I feel is right for organic and vegan products.
I hope that answers you, Rahul. And it's a very generic thing. And when the cost and the production will go down, it's going to, put an impact on the cost. So thank you for that, Mr. Gore. We have KV Premraj. He says, Mr. Sake, thanks for giving us an international perspective on how to do business. Parini says, thank you so much. It was very useful. Ansi says, that's so true. There is no good time to make your time. Okay, that's the answer for you. We have Jay Shah, I think she's Gina. She says, how is the global view for Indian products? How do people abroad view Indian products?
Okay. Good question. I think during the course of our earlier conversation, I was saying if products are made in USA, products are made in EU, or let's say Australia, automatically, or South Korea, they automatically are considered to be superior quality products. India has established great name in IT services or even in manufacturing generic pharmaceutical medicines. Okay, when you step out, and I'm talking about across the world, these two industries, India is considered to be far, far superior or at par with global manufacturers. Made in India, unfortunately, doesn't have the same recognition and awareness level or considered as superior quality products in other categories. Most of the countries, let's say in Asia, it is at par. Okay, a product called made in India is not considered inferior, but it doesn't connote superiority in any way. Okay, I'm talking about products which are manufactured. I'm not getting into things like raw material like silk and other stuff, but products which are manufactured in India are considered to be acceptable quality. It doesn't have any great superiority aspect as compared to products made in USA, Europe, or Australia. It is definitely not considered inferior. That is something which I can say very well, that consumers do not consider the products inferior at all.
I hope that answers you, and I guess, yes, that was a view that we all were looking for about Indian products. Also, we have Verena, she's saying, what are the upcoming sectors and markets in Southeast Asia, and which markets are greatly hit, if possible, if you could tell us?
Okay. I would actually start from the positive side is countries like Vietnam have had least amount of impact. Okay, it did not have any major impact, and the number of cases in countries like Vietnam have been very minimal. Hence, the economy will actually, amongst the larger economies in the world, Vietnam would grow. As an economy, it won't decline. As of today, that is my feeling that it would not have any impact, and it will definitely grow. Countries like, and I'm keeping China out of it because the question was Southeast Asia, so China doesn't appear there. Vietnam, to some extent, Malaysia, I would say are countries which will still, Vietnam definitely will report a positive growth. Countries like, I think Malaysia will have less impact because they had the pandemic in had controlled the pandemic successfully. Countries like Thailand, it is dependent a lot on tourists, and hence their local consumption will not get impacted, but their overall economy might suffer. And hence that country might have challenges, is how I see for Thailand as a country. Okay. If your question is slightly more expanded, look at Nepal, look at Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. These countries, in fact, I have spoken about Bangladesh a few times. And I would urge all of you to actually go and read about Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a country which is reporting significant growth, consistent growth for the last decade. Okay, the per capita income has been consistently growing. On most parameters, Bangladesh as a country is reporting better performance than other developing markets. So this is one country I feel still might report a positive growth along with other countries. So I think Raina, she had asked, that was the question. Look at Vietnam, look at Malaysia as two countries which will report good business, good consistent growth. Sorry, that I think is a wrong phrase. They would report a positive growth this year on GDP. It would obviously have less impact for them next year, is how I see.
Thank you so much.
If you were to pick countries, I would say take Vietnam and Bangladesh.
Great. Thank you so much, Saket.
Thanks for the question, Rana. Thank you, Saket, for that. We have Nisha Padmanabhan. She's asking, I am a visiting faculty in one of the colleges offering printing and packaging degree. As this syllabus consists of a 6-month training and internship starting from Jan, the earlier batch was called back due to COVID scenario. Can you please give some positive message to the students, as the present students, that is 2021 batch, are very concerned about their jobs?
Okay, I have one broad comment and observation. I think we have spoken or we read a lot about negative news right now that GDP is collapsing and others, but consumption level of product categories, okay, consumption level of product categories have not dropped anywhere. And let me take that example. We haven't stopped using a toothpaste. We haven't stopped using a face wash or a shampoo. These categories, or let's say biscuits, we haven't stopped. And as consumers, we have not only altered our ways of, let's say, commuting, altered our way of purchasing. That is, we perhaps would be buying from e-commerce, or online purchases have increased. Consumption patterns haven't changed. So when consumption patterns haven't changed, obviously there would be demand for products. So when there is a demand for product, obviously they need packaging. The need for packaging, which is going to be more sustainable, will perhaps increase. They will need innovations on packaging where we will have to source material which is locally available. So the industry will definitely need young people like you. Do not, I would say, get disheartened at all. There was a pause on hiring. I personally do not think so that hiring will stop. So don't be disheartened. Okay, you, at least whatever we have been reading, that hiring is already started. Companies, obviously, when their factories are being affected, might slow down, but hiring you can start seeing will pick up from next quarter. I'm saying next quarter is immediately. So do not be disheartened. I would say that do your study, complete your course. Each and every one of you are likely to get place on campus, or you will find a job. Don't be worried at all.
That really encourages Mr. Gore. Thank you so much. Nisha, I hope that answers you, and the students will be pretty much all charged up with this.
Yes, very much. Thank you so much.
Good resources will always be in demand. They can never go out of demand. That is one thing I completely believe. So yes, so we have Ruxana saying, quite informative. Thank you. Mr. Chenulu says, fantastic session with high utility value. Thanks, Saket. Mihir says, thank you very much for sharing the experiences and insights. Much valued and appreciated. We have Sanjay Jagasia. He says, thanks for the insight. Very informative. Rena says, a question. Okay, ask him my question. Okay, I already asked, I think. So this was like a repeat. So that was about the questions and the kind of energy that we have from our participants. And each minute spent here was extremely valuable, and we have got to learn a lot. Okay, we have Rajan. Okay, Rajan is saying, dear Shri Gore, it was pleasure to have you speak to Power Up Business Tribe and share the global business perspectives. How does Asian consumers see Himalaya products as compared to international brands?
When we step outside India, we are an international brand.
Oh.
So the moment you step outside India, it's an international brand, right? I said people in Indonesia see this as a foreign brand. People in Singapore see it as a foreign brand.
Okay.
So in terms of quality, in terms of efficacy, we are at par. or slightly better in many markets. So we compare and place very favorably with larger multinationals. So we are extremely proud to say that when consumers in foreign countries buy our product, or when we become market leaders in certain category, which clearly means that they are choosing us over multinational brands. So in those countries, Himalaya is a foreign brand, international brand, and there has been, and I'm very happy to share that not a single product complaint that we received so far,
Wow.
because of the stringent quality parameters that we have. So far there has been absolutely no issues at all. And as a co-Indian, I would say that all of us should be happy that products from India are considered to be equally equal to multinational produced products.
Wow, that's such a proud thing to hear for us as Indians also, because Himalaya being at least born as an Indian brand. So thank you so much. We have Vishal Sharma. He has asked 2 questions. So I think I'll take the last question, Vishal. He says, Mr. Gore wanted to also ask you as to whom would you like to give the credit for Himalaya's success to? Is it the manpower, the employees, product range, Ayurveda Connect, or the marketing and advertising strategy? Which one do you feel is the most important factor? Thank you.
2 aspects which come to my mind is, one is our great R&D. Our scientists actually who have been based on Ayurveda, who have been developing those wonderful products, and hence we have taken ingredients which were not known internationally, and actually getting products, let's say, people from Europe, people from ASEAN, people from Africa, buying our products. It says a lot about the quality of product, because marketing you could replicate, people you could get great people, but unless you have a great product, consumers will not come back to you. And the only unique differentiation that we have vis-a-vis any other brand is usage of Ayurveda and great R&D. I think that was a great investment which our founders have done for the brand. Is everything else can be developed, but if you don't get your product right, that is the only stepping stone on which the entire business gets built. Nothing else can replicate that.
Very true. I hope that answers you, Vishal. Thank you for that, Saket. Vandana says, thank you so much, Mr. Saket and Ms. Jaya, for the valuable session. Thank you, Vandana. Sanjay Jagasia says, I feel leadership also matters a lot. Absolutely, Sanjay. And hence we have a leader here who is here to guide us and to give us so many insightful tips that he has given. So yes, thank you for that. We also have Mr. Rajan again saying, thanks, Shri Gore. So with that, we have covered all the questions and all that people had to say. And thank you so very much, Saket, for being here. It really means a lot. You've come here, shared so much of your value with us. And I'm sure, you know, we were also getting comments where people said that this has really changed my perspective on import and export and all. So thank you so much for that.
Most welcome. It was pleasure chatting. And if anybody would ever want to get any thoughts or like to share, you can get my details. I'm available on LinkedIn, or you can drop me an email. If I can be of any help, I'll be very happy to further help you to set up your business.
That's so nice of you. Thank you so much. And with that, I would also want to once again highlight that the sponsors for today's episode are Anand Rathi, and we have with us a few of our friends from Anand Rathi here. Lakhan Thakkar, we have Minal Shah. I would like Minal to come and just say a few words about how did she find this, and if introduce herself a little bit. Minal, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Honestly, this webinar has been an eye-opener for me, and I have learned a lot. See, our business model is more in an entrepreneurial approach. We have that kind of approach. So for us, in terms of strategic learning, this has been really, really amazing. Thank you, Mr. Saket and Ms. Jaya, for showing us the way. You know, while this seminar was basically about expanding your business, I would like you to, I would like to invite you people next week for another interactive seminar known as Wealth Rendezvous. Now, this webinar is basically focusing on your personal growth. So when I talk about personal growth, Anand Rathi Wealth Services Limited is basically a objective-driven wealth management company that has over 5,000 clients, and we manage assets across the globe, and our assets that we manage is over 20,000 crores. Yeah, so one thing that we have realized in these last few months is that, you know, the pandemic has shown us that life is very fragile, and that we really need to take steps, very well thought out steps, to ensure that our family is safe and secure, and especially financially safe and secure, so that no matter what untoward incidents happens, we are prepared. So at Anand Rathi, this is something that we do really well. You know what we have been, our entire premise of what we do is based on three things. One is growth, protection, and transmission. Now, when I say growth, this is something that all wealth management companies offer. But what I mean is that, you know, we prefer to make the entire process very simple for you. We don't go into business jargons. We don't try to make it sophisticated and try to make it intellectual. We believe that it has to be as simple, because it's your money. And if you don't understand it, you'll never be able to have that trust in us. The second thing that we do is, you know, we believe that there is objectives which are key for clients. Now, what do I mean by objectives? Now, if I tell you that this is your objective, it becomes your point B, because your point A is where you are now. So you have to move from point A to point B. We will show the direction of it if it interests you, but this is what we aim to do, because a lot of wealth is a cluster of products, but it is directionless. Third thing that we do is that we get our clients' returns audited by one of the big fours, and we do that because we believe that we have to maintain honesty and transparency, and I can only do that if I get my results audited and I can show it. So we do it by one of the big fours. In the last 5 years, we've been giving 14.1% return for our clients every year. So that's something that we have taken very seriously, because we are a client-centric organization, and we do that religiously. And we also have the concept of Plan B, which is something like, you know, something as simple as, you know, if right now, if your net connection stops working, what would you do? You would immediately, you know, if your Wi-Fi stops working, you would go to the hotspot, you know, start your hotspot and log in, right? So that's your Plan B. You already have a setup in place. What happens in most of our cases is that if the products or if the portfolio is not doing well, we have seen a lot of clients get a very random feedback saying the markets are bad and it's out of our control. But that's the nature of the market, because you're investing in it. It's always going to be uncontrollable and volatile. That's the nature of it. So what we do is we create a Plan B, which gets activated when the market is volatile, or when the market is not moving at all. So tomorrow, I'm never going to come and tell you, you know, that, you know, I'm not able to deliver because the market is bad. I am going to deliver no matter which way the market turns. So these are something that we offer. One thing that what I love about this organization is that we invest in the products that we offer you. So I'm not going to offer you a product that I've not invested in already. And I think that's a definition of what kind of a person you are supposed to be. If you can't consume it, how can you offer it? It's a very simple, but I believe that this is the you know, ticking point for me. Like even when I joined, this was something that really drove me to realize that this organization means value addition in its true sense. So this is what when I'm talking about the growth aspect. So after growth comes the aspect of protecting your wealth. Now, you know, when you talk about protection, you know, many businesses, you know, we have heard during this pandemic have shut shop. There have been so many things, like people have been laid off, so many news is not on the good side, but more on the negative side. But this is one aspect of the coin. What happens if there is a legal liability on you? What do you do? How do you respond to it? How do you ensure that during this such a point of time, your family is protected no matter what. No matter what legal repercussions, or no matter what happens, in terms of your business aspects of things. So this is something that there is a mechanism in place for this, of course, which can actually secure your wealth in such a way that your family is protected no matter however or whichever direction you're going professionally. And a classic example I would say for this would be Vijay Mallya. Mr. Mallya has led a flamboyant life, but now also, as his companies are going off the grid, he is still very much where he is. And with all due respect to him, he has been able to do that because he had a mechanism that his father set in place for him that protected him from any of the legal repercussions, which I think is very smart planning. And it's something that we all need to keep in mind, because we want to grow, we want to make it big, but we have to also look at both sides and be practical about it. The third aspect is transmission. And in transmission, I mean that estate planning. What do I mean by estate planning? Let me just put it like a small, very basic example. If there are two children, they're fighting over a toy. You're undecided whom to give that toy to. You say you keep it for some time, you keep it for some time, but it doesn't that until you have a balanced approach to it, it is not going to find a way out. So this is something that we look at on a larger picture when it especially comes to transmission of your wealth from one generation to another. It is very important that you decide where you have to give it, how you have to give it, and to whom you have to give it. These are some things that we facilitate for our clients. And one of the things that a lot of our senior clients never realized, that it was actually hanging on their head as something that kept that was unclear in their mind, and we've enabled them to make it clear. Of course, will is something, creation of a will is something that all of us have to do it, no matter the age. Once we start earning, it's always good to have a system in place. And the pandemic has shown us that everybody is vulnerable. Nobody is safe and secure. So I feel that these are things we usually offer our clients. And to talk more about this more in detail, we have the next week, the unit head of our organization, Pratima Dhawan. Lakan, can you just put up that poster?
So that everybody... Okay, thank you so much for that, Minal. And we can see the poster also.
Correct. So on 29th August at 11 a.m., we have a webinar, interactive webinar about wealth management. And I would really appreciate it if you guys, if you feel that this is making sense to you and adding value, then definitely please join us. We would really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And thank you so very much once again, Mr. Saket Gore. Really, really today's session has been so insightful and so many learnings, and we are all thankful to you from the bottom of our hearts.
My pleasure.
Yeah, we just had, I think somebody who knows you has messaged Manoj Maniket. He says, nice to see Saket after a long time.
Okay, that's great. Manoj and I used to briefly work together at Airtel. So that goes back many, many years back.
Okay, even I know Manoj sir very well. So yes, great to see you both on the same this thing. We have Vincentia. She says, thank you very much, Saket and Jaya, for arranging this session. Thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you, each one of you. Thank you, Minal. That was really good insights. Thank you, Saketji. Really, really thankful. How many ever times I say thankful, it's not going to be enough. So thank you.
Thank you, and have a good evening, all of you. Thank you so much.
Enjoy yourself, guys. Have a great weekend, all of you, and we'll catch up soon. Thank you so very much.
Sure. Let's see you guys
next
week.
Thank you, Jayaji. Thank you, Saket sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.